I don't know, right last week, my Rabbi said that, he got nothing to fear, this and that. He's not claiming that's the end of days, that, Messiah is imminent. I mean, it'll say we are living the Messianic era. I don't think there's any question about that. When it manifests itself in the end, anybody's guess. But, as we mentioned before, there is a medrash. There is a medrash that says in the book of Psalms that if there is going to be this war, it's going to start with the king of Paras, right? Whereas Paras is modern day Iran. So, I would think that the writing's on the wall, but it doesn't have to be that way either. It can start, a million different ways. So whatever's going to be, we have to hold on. That's for sure. We got to understand that God runs the world, right? That is, also for sure. Um, second. All right, welcome to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. So I want to answer something that someone just recently sent me. Again, no shortage. No shortage of things that I don't know. I still think need to be addressed. Still think it's not a bad thing, to address, because this person's not the only one that makes the claim. A lot of others that make similar claims. So the question was not really. I wouldn't say it's a question, but more like a statement. And the statement's like this. Statement is, I'm not even going to get background to it. We'll get background to it in a second. The question was, will clean-shaven rabbis or Jews go to hell? Right? Interesting comment. Now, many rabbis don't believe in hell, unfortunately. Now, let's make clear. If you're an Orthodox Jew, yeah, heaven and hell, right? Certainly hell is not mentioned directly. Right? Not mentioned. It's definitely not mentioned directly. Om Haba, the next world, also not mentioned. Not mentioned. Not mentioned directly in the Torah, in the prophets, hinted at, but it's not mentioned directly. Now, reward and punishment is very clear. It's one of the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. Right? It's one of the 13 principles of faith in Maimonides. The Torah makes very clear. I don't have to come on to the Rambam. We say it every day. It's part of the Shema, second paragraph. You do the right thing, you have food, you have water, everything will be good. You do the wrong thing, there'll be payback. You look at the curses in the book of Leviticus, you look at the curses in the book of Deuteronomy, unfortunately, they've come to fruition. Why'd they come to fruition? Right? Because this person's going to say everybody's innocent. Who's innocent? You do the wrong thing, there's payback. Oh, you can tell me, what about repentance? What about the fact I can repent? Very good. So there is repentance. Okay, even for non-Jews. Non-Jews are worked a little bit differently, right? Non-Jews, just stops them from being punished. We see that by what happened to people in Nineveh. For a Jew, it uproots the whole thing. It's like they never did it, right? They come closer to God, right? We've spoken about repentance before, right? But nobody's truly innocent, right? King Solomon made clear in Ecclesiastes, where he brings it down, right? We mentioned this before, so I'm not going to harp on it. And that is everybody sins. So there are a handful of people who died because of the sin of Adam and Eve. Okay, but everyone else sins at some level, even the greatest people at some level. So there's payback. 100% there's payback, right? Where is that payback? Could be in this world, could be in the spiritual world, right? But hell is a common concept. It is something that we all hold by, or we should hold by, right? That there is going to be rectification of the soul in order for the soul to have a portion of the world to come, right? It's brought down in Kabbalistic sources, right? It's hinted at in the Torah. I won't bring down the Talmud because the person doesn't hold the Talmud, doesn't matter, right? It's brought down to those, probably doesn't hold the Kabbalah either. I'm not necessarily going to go there either, whatever. But so this statement is false. We'll see by why I say it's clean-shaven rabbis. But many rabbis do not believe in hell. Now, who's he talking to? You want to tell Reform and conservative rabbis? I agree. But they're not rabbis. They don't know anything, right? These people know absolutely zero. I'm not even going to cut them any slack. They don't know nothing. Nothing from nothing. Yeah. since they know nothing from nothing, and they're going to say, I don't believe in hell. It doesn't fit my world outlook. Okay, that's true. Doesn't fit their world outlook. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean there's not payback. Doesn't mean there's rectification of the soul. Doesn't mean that. So if you want to make the statement, so make the statement right? There's two things Kaufman can't stand. This is what's ingrained in everybody's head. One is I can't stand people that lie or misrepresent. Pretty much the same thing, right? So if you're going to say it right. And that is many Reform and conservative rabbis do not believe in heaven and hell. That's a true statement. That I got no problem with because it's true. They don't believe in it. You want to tell me there's some modern Orthodox rabbis or some other people that give their different spin on what they think heaven and hell is? Okay, right? So you can have heretics among the Jewish people, even the quote-unquote Orthodox. They could be heretics as well, right? They're going to say, oh, come on, you really think, Manus Friedman said, you really think, you're getting burnt? You really think there's fire on a spiritual being? Well, the soul feels it. I would agree. If you take, physical fire and you take something that is spiritual, which you can't see, and you light it, is the fire going to burn it? Come on, you're right. But the soul feels it. So it's a good question. How does fire, if you talk about the fires of hell, is what, is hinted at. If you talk about the fires of hell, very good. Can fire hit a spiritual object? No. Right? Can God make that fire or whatever it is, let's say better, can God make the soul, which is inside of us, can God make the soul feel like it's on fire? Well, God can do anything, right? God can, God cannot make a rock too big he can't throw, right? God is infinite. So, God can do anything. He can make the soul, even if it's not in the body, feel like it's on fire. He can do that. Now, again, you want to talk physical fire? It's a good question. How would physical fire do that? Good question. Very, very good question. Yeah. But you're not going to scoff at it. And you're going to say, oh, come on, you really think? You really think it's going to burn? You really think a person's going to suffer like that? You ever met anyone been in that world and come back? I mean, suffering. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But if God can do anything, which we believe he can, so if God can do anything, why can't he make a person feel like they're on fire even if they're not in the body? He can do that. Right? So now, the true statement over here would be, we'll just correct it here, that many rabbis don't believe in hell, unfortunately. So who are you talking to? You want to tell me Reform and conservative rabbis? Progressive rabbis? Liberal rabbis? You want to tell me anyone in between? And maybe some unorthodox rabbis? I agree. That's a true statement. Everybody else, you want to tell me ultra-Orthodox people don't, ultra-Orthodox rabbis don't believe in heaven and hell? Very hard to say. Right? That's heresy. If they don't believe in it, you're right, it's wrong. One of the questions the Rambam asks, the Maimonides asks in 13 Principles of Faith, right? When he talks about resurrection of the dead. When he talks about resurrection of the dead, he's got an obvious question. What about Olam Haba? What about the next world? Why doesn't he include the next world? Is it because the Rambam doesn't believe in the next world? No. Rambam also believes in the spiritual world. Also believes in the next world. So what's the problem? So why does he include it? Because they're the same time period. They come around the same time. Olam Haba, is usually going to come after resurrection of the dead. Sometimes they come before, according to some opinions. And then you have the final judgment, resurrection of the dead, right? So they go hand in hand. So the Rambam did not feel he needed to mention Olam Haba. It's inclusive, right? It's inclusive in resurrection of the dead. Now, all these principles are basic principles all Jews have to believe in. I would think some of them are good for non-Jews to believe in, not obligated. Certainly not obligated, but I certainly believe that's a good thing, for them to believe in. But if you're a card-carrying Jew or you're a Jew wannabe, right, you have to believe in them. You have to believe God is absolute, that God doesn't change. You have to believe there's a reward and punishment, whether in this world or the next world. You got to believe Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest of all prophets. You got to believe in the coming of the Messiah, resurrection of the dead. Now, if you don't believe, let's say you repent for it, very good. If not, If not, the person can lose their status as a Jew. These are fundamental principles. Reward, anyone's going to tell you, again, it's a total lie. Everybody's innocent. Who says everybody's innocent? You read the Torah, you do the right thing. Very good. You do the wrong thing. There's payback. Says it all the time. We're gonna read it this week's parsha Shlach, right? The spies. Because of the sin of the spies, we're still paying the price. We're still paying the price. Well, they spent 40 years going around in circles and going through China and who knows what before they got into the land. Because they didn't have proper enough faith, or whatever the issue was, they spoke badly against the land of Israel. Okay, and these were great people. So very, all of these stories, as we mentioned before, very hard to understand, face value. Very, very hard. But at the same time, I would say that these are fundamental things. Fundamental things means you got to believe in it. Otherwise, you're not a Jew. Yeah. Now the question is, what does it mean to wait for the coming of the Messiah? So everyone's brought down many times from Rav Cheskel Abramsky, blessed memory. He was the head of based in London, spent his last years living in Israel, and Torah giants the last generation, quote everybody. And he said it's like you're waiting for somebody to come at 9:00, right? You got an appointment with someone at 9:00. You're anxiously awaiting them coming at 9:00. That's what it means. So it's not just like a philosophical thing. You are anxiously awaiting. Yeah. And if you're not necessarily anxiously awaiting, but you believe in it, okay, you still get credit. But he's saying that's what it means. Okay. But these things are fundamental. They are totally fundamental. This is what I have to believe in. Very good. So tell me, many Reform and conservative rabbis don't believe in it. Don't believe in hell. Okay. That I don't have a problem with. That's a true statement. But when you say many rabbis in general, you're including me. And you're including all other ultra-Orthodox Jews. So when you include them, that's a problem. That is going to be a serious problem. That's a serious affront because they do believe. Right? They're obligated to believe in it. So where do you get off saying they don't believe it? Well, you took a survey? Yeah, you took a survey of all ultra-Orthodox Jews, and it came to the conclusion that 89.35% don't believe in hell or heaven or punishment. Where do you get that from? Again, you want to tell me more liberal people don't believe in it? Very good. I don't have a problem with that. It's true. Right? A lot of things they don't believe in. Right? Conservative people don't believe in it. They don't believe in God, a lot of them. Okay, that's not surprising. But don't Orthodox Jews not believe in God? 100%. Is the way they're going to believe in God different? It should be the same in different ways. You come to God in different ways. You can serve Him in different ways. Right? But in general, you have to be within parameters. You get to be doing whatever you want, right? As we mentioned many times. But I want to get to the punchline here. What's the punchline? The punchline is, what is he talking about clean-shaven rabbis? You have people that don't have beards. What's the problem? So Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27. I'm going to quote it here. Let's say you got it right. Do not cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip the edges of your beard. Yeah? Let's see if you got the translation right. I didn't get a chance to bring it up before. 1 second. Where's my see if I can bring it up here. All right, I'm not gonna be able to bring it up. There we go. 1 second. Let me just so let me just see the quote again. 1927. Okay. It's 19. All right, let's bring this up. 1927 says the Torah. We'll quote it in Hebrew, then we'll quote it in English. Lo takifu pas roishchem, lo tashchis es pas zikanecho. Says, do not round off the corner of your beard. Do not destroy the edge of your beard. Now, obviously, it's going to need clarification, right? Let's see how this person translated it. It says, do not cut off the hair at the sides of your head or clip the edges of your beard. Okay, you got part of it right. I got part of it right. It says don't round off the corner of your head. Okay. Yeah. Now, you see people that are clean shaven. Now, clean shaven does not mean bald. It can't be bald. Why not? Because you have to have side curls, right? So you're going to say, where are your side curls? Right here. Some grow them longer, right? I've seen them grow them much longer, right? Some people grow them longer. They put them over their ear. Okay. Now, the Torah says, don't cut the hair at the sides of your head. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean you're not allowed to cut the hair at the sides of your head? What does it mean, the sides of your head? Here? Up here? That's the side of my head also, I could think. Right? Where's the side of your head? Where's the side of your head? Now, cutting the hair, does that mean I can leave, I don't have to cut it down to the roots, let's say, or I can leave stubble. Maybe that also means not doing it, but I don't have a beard, let's say. So there are 5 places. 5 places we understand. Don't cut the hair the sides of your head. Where are the sides of your head? Right? Sides of your head can be here. This is the side of your head, right? Start of the jawbone. On both sides, right? On both sides. Now, what's also considered the side of your head where the jawbone goes all the way here, right? So it can also be here. I got 2 things, right? I got 4 sides, and in the middle. So I got 5 places. The rabbis learn out you can't cut. Now, but what does it mean not to cut here? So any Orthodox Jew, in general, has to have at least sideburns down to here, down to the beginning of the jawbone. Now, having side curls means I have enough hair I can grab with my fingers. If it's totally clean shaven, you can't grab any hair, right? That's gonna be a problem. Very good. That'll be a problem. So most Orthodox Jews, right? I'm not gonna say all because maybe some don't, right? Maybe they're totally clean shaven, even up here. So the issue is, at least at that point, you have to have hair there. Now, what's the whole problem? See, this is my issue. This is one of my issues. Got a lot of issues. One of them over here is that when people say something, and this person also made the claim, he doesn't know much about, the Torah. Okay. So then why quote something when you don't know what the parameters are? The Torah says, I'll cut this person some slack. Do not cut the hair of the sides of your head. Now, do we have any definition where the sides of your head are? You're going to tell me it's here. Someone's going to tell me it's up here. Someone's going to tell me the side of my head can be anywhere down here. It can be the whole area. Yeah, it's not one place. It could be a number of places. But as we've mentioned many times before, the Torah does not have any definitions. Right? Torah does not answer anything here. The Torah just tells me, do not cut the hair of the sides of your head or the edge of your beard. So now I got 2 things. Where is the sides of my head and where's the edge of my beard? So you say, come on, very simple. Anyone knows that side of your beard is right here. Yeah, how far? How far does it go? Does it start right here by the jawbone, the bottom, the edge? What is the edge? Right here? Maybe a little bit above it. Maybe a little bit above it. The Torah doesn't tell me. Right? Torah doesn't tell me. Now, I do understand I can't cut the side of it. Okay. Now, what does it mean to cut the side of it? Does cutting the side of it mean I can shave with an electric razor and I don't cut the root? I once saw a commercial for Remington. Remington had a commercial once for shavers, and it said goes to the roots. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what they claimed. It cuts like a razor. It goes to the root and cuts it up. In other words, it plucks the root up from the bottom and it cuts the entire root off of the hair. Yes, I said, that's forbidden. How do I know it's forbidden? Because It says you don't have to cut the sides. Now, what does cutting the sides means? It means like a razor, sharp, right? It means cutting it from the roots. That's what it means. If I leave a little bit there, very good. If I cut the entire root, it says I have to have hair there. I have to have some level of hair. How much? Good question. Torah doesn't tell me that either. Right? It says don't cut the hair of your side. See, again, this is a very good example where you have a verse in the Torah that gives me nothing. Meaning it gives me no definitions. It doesn't tell me how to do it. Again, this is going to beg for rabbinic interpretation. It's going to beg for interpretation because it gives me no answers. And if you don't do it, it's a Torah prohibition for a guy. It does not apply to a woman, right? This is for a guy. Yeah? So I have no definitions. Now, person's going to claim, well, what about a clean-shaven rabbi? Say an Orthodox Jew, sounds better. Yeah, a clean-shaven Orthodox Jew. Now, a clean-shaven Orthodox Jew, even if they're clean-shaven here and in the bottom, they're not clean-shaven. They should not be clean-shaven up here. Because at the very least, it says don't cut the hair at the sides of your head. So they're going to have, in Kaufman's language, the Elvis chaos, right? The Elvis side curls, right? Remember Elvis back in the day? Yeah, got to win this race. Come on, right? Got to, go back to Elvis back in the day. You're going to have sideburns. Now, how far the sideburns go down? Good. Another question, right? But an Orthodox Jew, at the very least, it's going to have sideburns. If an Orthodox Jew, if they shave totally, that area, that is a problem. Other areas, we'll get to. But the side of the head, the Torah makes clear, you can't shave the side of your head. So if we're going to say the side of your head starts by the jawbone, that means you have to have hair over here, right? You cannot cut it down to nothing. You certainly can't use a razor, right, and cut it down through the skin. That you can't, right? If you use something else, use a scissors motion, like a lot of electric razors. They use a scissors motion, so that's very good. That doesn't get to the root. Now, there are some, like this Remington, still exists or not. This Remington, what does it do? If the claim is true, if it goes to the root and pulls the hair out, that's exactly like a razor. So anything that's going to do that's going to be forbidden. So if you see an Orthodox Jew that does not have any sideburns at all, ask them. Why don't they have sideburns? Yeah. Now, if they're clean shaven everywhere else, so again, what did the Torah say? The Torah said that you have to have side curls, right? You can't cut the sides. You cannot cut the sides, and you got to leave the edge of your beard. Now, what does that mean in the vernacular? How can I learn that? I can learn very simple. It means I have to have hair at least here, maybe a little further down, like the Elvis side curl, Elvis sideburns, let's say. But what about the rest of my face? What about the rest of my face? Can I leave it clean shaven? Technically, it only said the sides and the bottom and the edge, right? This is not the side or the edge. So that if a person's clean shaven, you cut them some slack. And you can say, guess what? The Torah made very clear, only the side or the top. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about over here. So who says I'm not allowed to be clean shaven? Now the only problem is, what about the edge of your beard? So maybe you're mostly clean shaven, or maybe you got some fuzz over here. Maybe you got some hair over here. But the problem over here is that we don't know where we're talking about. It's not that the Torah does not make clear where it's talking about. The side of the face, the side of the head, right? That's what it says. Again, let me bring this up. If it says, do not cut the sides of your head. Now, are the sides of your head only up here? Or does it mean the entire head? This is also the side of your head. You say, well, it's the top quarter, it's the middle quarter of your head. I don't know, you want to get into semantics? That's also part of your head, the side of the head. Why is that not the side of your head? Right? So if we're not sure what that means, and that could be the entire side of the head all the way from here all the way down, then how can you be clean shaven? That's the question. Right? But again, there are rabbinic authorities that hold. Right? The Torah obligation is up here on the bottom. Right? Anywhere in between. You don't have to have a beard per se. Okay. But again, this is a Torah prohibition. This is a Torah prohibition. We have to have some guidelines what this means. What this means. Right? So now, the person's going to claim, I just want to finish this up, that, first of all, we don't have definitions. We don't have definitions. So isn't it better not to take any chances? I would think it's better. Right? I think it's better not to take any chances. Yeah? Right? And many rabbinic authorities are going to say the same thing. Yeah? Many are going to say the same thing. Now, even if that's true, right? Even if that's true, is it worth it to transgress a Torah prohibition for this? Yeah? Probably not. But some people will say, doesn't matter. It only meant up here. I have rabbinic authorities hold like me that say it's up here. Right? So I can be clean shaven. But no one says all the way up, I should be totally bald. I should have no hair. Zero. Like to the root. Who says that? Right? But I want to get to the point. I don't want to get sidetracked here by definitions. Could easily do that. So person says, but he's clean shaven. So obviously, this person's going to claim if he's clean shaven, he's going to fry in hell forever. It's a Torah prohibition. Very good. So that's this person. Okay, it's a Torah prohibition. It's a Torah prohibition if you cut that area. That death penalty? What's the penalty? What's the penalty? Yeah? Transgress the Torah prohibition is not death penalty. It's 100% not death penalty. Right? Now, that being said, it's prohibition. It's a severe prohibition, but it's not death penalty. So now the claim is, and I hear this a lot from people like this, and that is, see, it's impossible for a Jew to follow all 613 commandments of the Torah. In rabbinic Judaism, it's impractical. The laws of kosher food beards were temporary. Where do you see that? These are two very potent statements here. God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. Yeah? He gave the Torah to the Jewish people, and he did it in front of 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, not including women and children. 3 million people. No one else makes such a claim. Right? That we've spoken about many times. No one makes such a claim. Okay. Now, if God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, and God said, do this, don't do that, stay away from this, stay away from that, did God understand who the Jewish people were? God understood who mankind was. He understood we're going to be fickle. We're not going to want to follow him all the time. We're going to be lazy, right? We're human, all these things. Okay. So if that's true, why would God give so many commands? Why would he give so many commands that are impossible to do? Why would he punish his people even more? Yeah. So first of all, the statement's a lie. It's impossible for a Jew to follow all 613 commandments. Well, and part of it's true. Part of it's true. Why do I say part of it's true? Because if a Jew is not a Kohen, which most people are not Kohanim, right? They don't come from the tribe of Levi. There are things you can't do. If you don't live in the land of Israel, there are things you can't do. If you're not a woman, there are things you don't do. Yeah? So you're right. A man or a woman cannot fulfill every command. That's true. Because there are things they can't do. There are things we can't do by technicalities. Yeah? Not if a person was a Kohen, okay, you'd be obligated in in a lot of different things. Oh, but we don't have a temple today. Okay, so you're limited. Yeah, you're definitely limited. Not everyone is commanded to do every single thing. They do what applies to them. See, again, this is part of the lie, right? I want to expose the lie over here. Yeah. A non-Kohen or Levite, like me, I'm a regular guy, regular Yisrael. I cannot do what a Kohen or a Levite does, right? And today, it doesn't really matter, right? Talking about, let's say, the time of the temple, doing the sacrifices, singing there, doing all kinds of other things. I can't do that. You know why? Because I'm not from that tribe, right? And I'll never be from that tribe. I used to tell my father, if you would have paid enough, I would have been one, but you didn't pay enough. I said, you're too cheap, right? You didn't pay. So I'm not a Kohen or a Levite. So I'm obligated to keep whatever applies to me. A woman is obligated to keep whatever applies to her. Now, there are things we can't do. Let's say a person's married, they never get divorced. Well, isn't divorce one of the commandments? I have an obligation to fulfill the commandment if I have no interest in getting divorced? No. You can't do it. It's a commandment you didn't do. It's a commandment you didn't do. But, if you got divorced, good. So you get that command also. But I should be looking to get divorced so I can fulfill the commandment? That doesn't make any sense. Right? There's some commandments that are hard to do. Very hard to do. Right? Shooing away the mother bird. You see a mother bird hovering over the eggs. Right? There's only a specific time you can do it. Not everyone merits to be able to do it. It's a good mitzvah to do. That, gives you long life. Probably, in the next world. Right? But sometimes the mitzvah you didn't do. Okay. If you can do it, very good. Right? But again, this is a fallacy. We're not obligated to keep every single command. There are commands we can't do. So whatever applies, even when the temple existed, could a simple Jew, an Israelite, not a Kohen or a Levite, are they going to have as many commandments to do as a Kohen or a Levite? No. Now you're going to throw that out and say, well, see, you can't do all the commandments because I'm not a Kohen. It's a technical issue. I'm not a Kohen. I'm not a Levite. I didn't come from that tribe. So even if the temple existed, many things I can't do. And what if you didn't live in the land of Israel? You don't get the mitzvah of taking trumas and ma'aser, right? Taking tithes from food, right? From fruits and vegetables. Or sabbatical year, Shemitah. If you don't live in the land of Israel, there's no Shemitah. There's no sabbatical year, leaving the land fallow. A friend of mine was on a plane once, told me a woman told him, she lives outside of Israel. A woman tells him, I keep the sabbatical year. He goes, why? It's because the Torah says you have to keep the sabbatical year. He goes, yeah, that's true, but that's only if you live in the land of Israel. It's only in Israel. It doesn't say outside of Israel, it says in the land. She's like, really? So if you don't live in the land of Israel, you can't keep the mitzvah of Shemitah. Can't do the sabbatical year. Now again, you don't know the field. There are different ways you can do this. But I'm not that's not the point. That's not the topic. There are things you can't do. And what if your wife your wife was never alone with anybody that you warned her against the whole thing of sota? Yeah, so you didn't do that. That's good. You didn't do that. It never came to that. What a person never stole. These are again. So you're fulfilling that by not stealing. Very good. Or not lending the Jew with ribbis. Okay. There are plenty of things we can do. But not every single mitzvah applies to every single person at all times. I mean, even if we had the temple today, there are things that, again, a Levite cannot do what a Kohen does. Kohen cannot do what a Levite does. And Yisrael, as everybody else, can't do what either do. So this is a false statement. Totally false statement. Everything else we got an obligation to keep. Whatever applies to us, we have to keep. Shabbos, Kashrus, 13 principles of faith, all the holidays. We got to pray. We got a million things to do. A million things to do. Is it hard? Yeah, it's not so easy. Okay, is it impossible? Who says impossible? Is a person going to claim, you can't punish me, God, because we're not Malchei Hasharis. We're not angels. You didn't give the Torah to angels. We make mistakes. Good, there's repentance. God understands that. We're not robots. He understands that. But you want to say it's impossible? Who says it's impossible? That's why you have to say it's God-given, because if any human being would have given it, given the Torah, you would have made it very easy. Make a few mitzvahs, 5 mitzvahs altogether that you can do, that are easy to do. All these mitzvahs don't make sense logically. We have to understand, what they mean and how to do them. Okay. But to make such a statement is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Impossible? This is impossible. Right? It should be challenging. Should be hard. Right? It should be things that I have to think about and I have to work at and all that. Yeah, impossible? Then God's setting everyone up for failure. Why would God set it up for failure? Everyone for failure. But want to be a Christian would be so easy. Just believe in Him. I don't have to do anything else. That's easy. It made it very easy. Okay, but the whole thing doesn't make sense. Okay. Now, that's one statement that's false. Second statement is Rabbinic Judaism is impractical. Now, if you're going to tell me they added a lot of things on, they don't add or subtract, they're putting safeguard around the Torah, which we've spoken about many times. They explain what the Torah means in this case. What does Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27 mean? I don't have rabbinic interpretation. He doesn't want to hold by rabbinic interpretation. Okay. But how else are you going to explain it? Everyone's going to come up with their own explanation. You can't have 10,000 different Torahs. Will never exist. Will never stay. Rabbinic Judaism is impractical. Why is it impractical? Why in the world is it impractical? There are a lot of laws you have to know, and you got to study, and you got to review. But a lot of things, they safeguarded the Torah. Very good. The laws of kosher food, beards, were temperate. Where do you see it's intemperate? Oh, where do you see kosher food is temperate? Beards are intemperate. Wants to make a, so taking another step further. Concerning the coronavirus pandemic, it was required by law to wear face masks. No one wears face masks. It's a temporary law. My kesha. What in the world is a connection? So even if you had to shave off your beard or part of your beard, so there is what to be said for this area. That's not a Torah obligation. Okay. But what does that have to do with anything? Because it's temporary. I mean, it's temporary. Sometimes, sometimes that's the case. Okay, but who says that's a Torah prohibition? May not be a Torah prohibition. Maybe it best a rabbinic prohibition. But it's not clear. That's the whole point. If it was a whole Torah prohibition, you wouldn't be allowed to shave your beard. Someone told me this the other day. Someone told me on Shabbos, this whole thing. Also. This whole thing with with gas masks. This is back in the early 90s when they gave out gas masks, and because they were afraid Iran was gonna, chemical weapons, or from Syria, from other places, and they were afraid. So what they do, you have gas masks, one size fits all, and most of them didn't work. By the way, it's also kind of ironic, right? But that came out later. But in general, you have a gas mask, right? You have a gas mask. Doesn't fit the beard. So a friend of mine, was telling me the story. So I said, "So what'd you do?" He goes, "I didn't wear it." He said, "Sorry, went off. It's during the Gulf War. He didn't wear it." He was like, he told me like he was first married. I was like, "How'd that go?" And I said, "Your wife agreed?" I said, "You still happily married?" He says, "Yeah, she got over it." So I thought, all right. But he didn't put it on. Okay. Now a lot of people did not shave their beard. A lot of people did not shave their beards. Yeah, I don't know what the percentage is, but I guarantee many did not. Many did not. So that doesn't change. So you're going to tell me, I mean, again, I want to show you where the logic is just outrageous. It just makes no sense. Since the coronavirus pandemic, was temporary, and therefore you had to wear a mask. Yeah, you had to wear a face mask. Who said you had to shave your beard? If you tell me it was a gas mask and you had to shave your beard because if you didn't, you couldn't get it on, and that could be dangerous, that's one thing. Yeah, anybody who wore masks in general, anyone shaved their beards because they wore a mask? I mean, it's uncomfortable. I would agree. Especially, if you don't trim your beard and it's bushy, yeah, it can be uncomfortable. Okay. But, who trimmed their beards? Who shaved their beards because of wearing a plastic mask? Like these statements not only are ludicrous, they're not based in fact at all. Like, where's the fact checker? I gotta get someone who's a fact checker here, right? Where's the fact checker over here? Yeah. So you want to tell me that's temporary, but who shaved their beards during Corona? There are a lot of people who didn't wear masks because of Corona. Yeah. Plenty of Orthodox Jews didn't. I'm not, going into it's right or wrong, right? There are plenty of people that didn't. Okay. But who shaved even if they did, who in the world shaved their beards to get on a mask? Get on a mask. You don't have to shave your beard for that. It's still going to fit. Still going to do the job. Right? So it's also, a false thing. But it has nothing to do with anything. Yeah. Again, I'm not even going to call it a misquote. It's just false. Right? And, so that's one thing. And so the kicker is only moral law. 10 commandments of Moses are permanent. So where does idolatry come in? For morality? You want to tell me, they had licentiousness there, other things, okay. So you have moral laws there. You have moral laws there. Yeah. Where's the proof? Where's the proof that's all that matters? It's the 10 commandments. Where's the proof for that? You only have to keep the 10 commandments. Where's the Torah tell me that? Where does the Torah, the Reforming Conservative Jews would say, I can pick and choose and do what I want? Torah doesn't tell me that. It doesn't tell me anywhere. And even if it would tell me, let's say, which it doesn't, but even if it would, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. 60, 70% intermarriage. But that's also a fallacy. So what's the punchline here? What's the bottom line? Right? Two things I want to get to. The last thing here is, what's important for a Jew to attain salvation, follow the 10 commandments, and help the poor and needy? Who said that? Did God say that? Did God make that direct command and say that's all you have to do? There's nothing else for me to do except the 10 commandments. 10 commandments are a lot to do, right? You believe in God. You're not doing idolatry. You don't kidnap, right? Stealing over there means don't kidnap. You don't covet. You honor your parents. You don't blaspheme with God's name. Okay. Yeah. And what about the rest of the entire Torah? By the Bereshit Moshe Lemor, God spoke to Jewish people saying, God spoke to Moses saying, speak to Jewish people. God spoke to Moshe and Aaron. God spoke to the entire Jewish nation. Do this, don't do that. Do the other thing. Don't do this. Okay. But why do you say it's only 10 commandments? You only have to keep the moral law. Well, isn't the entire Torah moral? I only have to keep that moral law. Yeah, the 10 commandments are given for a reason. 10 commandments are significant. Very good. And all the other commandments are not? I only have to keep the 10 commandments and nothing else? Where does it say that? Where does it say that? Someone comes, a potential convert, comes to Shammai, and he says, I want to convert. I want to convert me on one foot. Shammai throws him out. Shammai totally throws him out. Comes along Hillel. It comes to Hillel. It was known to be more reasonable, maybe. Or maybe a little more lenient, I don't know. More easygoing, let's say. So he comes to Hillel and says, convert me on one foot. He says, he says, fine. He says, I can tell you the whole Torah in one line. He said, the entire Torah in one line is, don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to yourself. The rest is interpretation. That's what Hillel said. Okay. Now, did he mean You don't have to keep any other mitzvahs? Was Hillel that shallow and said, no, you just keep these mitzvahs and nothing else? Where do you see that? In the Torah itself, where do you see that? Forget about rabbinic Judaism. Where do you see it? Right? Where in the world do you see such a thing? Right? And it doesn't matter whether it's clean shaven or not. Like all of a sudden you just made yourself God. You pick and choose like what's important, what's not important. Desecration of Shabbos, death penalty. Desecration of, doing idolatry, death penalty. Death penalty. Yeah. Not honoring parents, that's not death penalty. Kidnapping, not death penalty. Coveting, not death penalty. Adultery, death penalty. Blaspheming God's name, I think it's death penalty. Not all the 10 commandments are death penalty. If you tell me you organize, the Torah organized all these mitzvahs, in the 10 commandments, they're all death penalty, all the most severe death penalty. Okay. Then you can tell me it's the most severe of all things. But even if that would be the case, where in the world do you see all the other mitzvahs? Don't matter. And it's good enough for me to be nice to everybody. What's your definition of good? I spoke about that. Spoke about that yesterday. My BJQ radio podcast. What does it mean to be good? That's what it's saying. Help the needy. Very good. Okay. Do other good deeds. Very good. What should they be? Where do you pick and choose over here? Right? But again, not, shaving your sidewalks, and shaving your beard where you're not allowed to is not death penalty. And certainly didn't make it into the 10 commandments. Right? 10 commandments are significant, I would agree. They are significant. But you got plenty of other things that are death penalty. Not mention the 10 commandments. Yeah. Homosexuality, death penalty. It's also a death penalty. There are plenty of things that death penalties don't make it, into 10 commandments. Right? But the problem I have with all this, first of all, don't comment on things you don't know. That's what I always say. You want to do the research, do the research. Right? He's got an axe to grind. I get it with rabbinic Judaism. There's a lot to do, this and that. It's impractical. According to who? And not only that, but the worst statement is it's impossible for a Jew to follow all the 613 commandments. So why'd God give it? And whatever you want to say about Christianity, Judaism is the only one that God spoke to the entire nation. So if God spoke to the entire Jewish nation, don't you think God knows better? And God understands the psyche of man that we're going to be able to do what he says? Even if it's hard, yeah, we're going to get punished if we don't. There's going to be, there could be severe payback, okay. But why would he do that? Why would he give so many commands he's not going to be able to do it? He's going to wipe them out anyway. It doesn't make any sense, logically. Right? And a lot of these same arguments, it's the same thing. It's all the same thing. They don't make logical sense. Forget about what the rabbis say. I'm not even going to what the rabbis say. I'm talking about using pure logic. And when you look at this verse, like many other verses, I'm going to get to Leviticus chapter 19, I don't know when, right? I'm going to get there. We're going to discuss it. But who in the world says, I understand what the verse means? This is the problem. This is the problem. I want to give it my own interpretation. Who the heck are you to give any interpretation? The Torah doesn't give any interpretation. The Torah doesn't give me anything. No variables. It just says, don't cut the hair to the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard. Does that give me any definition? Where, how, what, when? Doesn't matter when I do it. Doesn't matter how I do it. Doesn't tell me anything. And now you can tell me, see, it's so impractical. And it's so, and no one can keep it all. And all these Orthodox rabbis don't have beards. All of them? Took a survey? Survey says? Right? You took a survey? Really? Are there a lot of people that are clean shaven? Yes. You want to tell me that's the majority of the outdoor Orthodox Jews in the world? I don't think so. You show me in the Hasidic community, people that don't have beards. Everybody has beards. In other Orthodox community, where I live and I've been in, everybody has beards. Some more, some less. And the vast majority is not even close. In the modern Orthodox community, you have some that do and some that don't. Okay. But the vast majority, I would say, is probably higher than 90%, that, a person grows a beard, they keep it. Yeah. and the other people that don't, okay. So if they have who to rely on, that they're allowed to shave and be clean shaven, okay. Yeah. The vast majority have beard. Like this is just like talking out of your elbow, right? Which is, I don't like to harp on these things, give personal, a platform for anything. But, I want to make clear these things are ludicrous. These statements are actually ludicrous. See, it sounds okay in a certain way. It's impossible for you to follow all the 613 commandments. Well, they can't keep all of them. That's true. Because a lot of, because there are a number of them don't apply to them, to everybody. Some apply to the land of Israel, right? Some apply if you're a Kohen or a Levite. Some apply if you made vows. Maybe you never made a vow, right? Maybe you never got divorced. Maybe there are plenty of things that may not apply. It doesn't mean, so guy, you got to keep all 613. Well, what if they don't apply to you? They gonna tell me God's wrong? God forbid, you made a mistake. You give all these commandments that aren't relevant. Some of them aren't relevant. You know why they're not relevant? Because we broke them. Yeah, we've been in exile for 2,000 years. Why we're in exile for 2,000 years? Sin. Even though we're in the land of Israel now, so good. You go back to Truma Meiser, giving tithes, all, sabbatical year, a lot of things. A lot of very good things. Yeah. There's going to be payback if we do the wrong thing. Doesn't mean we can't keep it, but there are things that will not apply to every single person. Right? You're going to say, but the Torah should apply to everybody, right? So, they're going to harp on this and say, see, this rabbi said it doesn't apply to everybody. It's not what I said. Not, most things will apply. But what if some things you never did? You never made a vow. Yeah, the whole thing about making vows. You never made a vow in your life. That doesn't apply to you. There are plenty of people who make vows, okay. Yeah, there are a number of things that don't, that are not going to apply to every single person. Right? The Torah in general applies to everybody. But when you break it down, maybe one day I'll go through all the mitzvahs, give a class on that. And you see what applies, when it applies, how it applies. Okay, but that's how you learn. When you make idiotic statements, not knowing anything, and especially saying, well, I'm not so well versed in Torah, you sound like an idiot. You sound like an absolute idiot, when you do that. So I just want to, clarify that. All right. Somebody mentions take questions here. Rabbi says Rashi didn't believe in hell. Okay. Maybe, it depends what aspect of it. I don't know. I don't know what what the context is, right? The Rambam states clear he doesn't believe in demons. Yeah, now certainly according to the Gemara, there were demons. Certainly according, the Gemara speaks about demons. Yeah, so the Vilna Gaon says that he made a mistake because everybody believes in demons. How did the Rambam make a mistake? Because he studied Aristotle, he studied Plato, right? And that drew him away from Torah. So he comes up with certain things that he says that Torah didn't, that we don't believe in or whatever, but he got messed up in, secular philosophy. Okay. Now the question's going to be, okay, if you're going to tell me Chabad holds Rashi didn't believe in hell, what does that mean? In all aspects, there's no punishment, there's no such place, there's no such spiritual place, there's no physical, there's no spiritual rectification. The question is what what exactly that means. It could be different definitions. Reishis Chochmah, he's got a whole book, and a lot of it talks about different levels of hell. Yeah. So you can say, okay, you want to say, I think it's pretty clear cut most people did believe and still believe. So even if you have some that don't, okay. Yeah. Yeah, but I would say the vast majority do. But again, to say, which is also problematic, when a person makes the comment, makes a statement and says that, oh, come on, you really think fire's going to burn them? I mean, they're making fun here. Like, you really think fire is going to burn them? If it's a spiritual, if it's spirit, if it's a spiritual thing, right? If it's a spiritual thing, then the soul can feel it. 100% the soul can feel it. Yeah. How does that work? That's a very good question. That's Kabbalah 101, 101, 101, 101A. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean it can't happen, right? But you know, this person wants to make everyone feel good, like they never did anything wrong and they're never going to get punished. That's a problem. That is a problem, right? What do? The Rambam, others, many others, not just about everybody. I mean, I don't see how you can go. I don't see how you can go. I don't see how you can go against it, right? I see absolutely no way. Oops, how you can, um, how you can go against that, right? It just doesn't make sense, right? So they're basic things you have to hold by, right? There are definitely things that you cannot, that you can't get around, right? And the problem is, so if you don't believe, okay, so I don't have a problem. You don't believe, right? Pretty clear, right? If you don't believe, you're a reformer conservative Jew, okay, so I can hear that. I can hear that very clear. That that doesn't bother me because they're not claiming. They're not claiming to believe. Okay, right? They'll have problems and other things, fine, but like that doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me at all. Because they're not holding it. They don't believe it. Okay, doesn't it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? That's not what it means. That's not what it means, right? It can't mean that, right? So good. So if you're not holding there, so a person's not holding there, okay. They don't want to believe. That's their, that's their choice. That's their choice. We want to tell me the vast majority of Orthodox Jews don't believe in it. Come on. That's going way too far. Right? That is going that's going too far. And again, if they're not believers, then that doesn't bother me. And the reason it doesn't bother me is because they don't because they don't believe. Okay. Right? But you want to tell me, you want to tell me in general, you want to tell me in general that's the case? I mean, that's that is that's kind of hard to say, right? That is definitely that is definitely that's definitely hard to say, right? And that's not something that's not something I would entertain. Are there people out there that quote unquote call themselves Orthodox and heretics? Yeah, they say heretical things. Yeah, that the majority? I don't think so, right? Definitely don't think so. Let me see the other questions here. Someone here asks, let me see. You had a Norelco Phillips brand raise. It does not pull or cut at the root. Very good. Right. As long as it doesn't, right, again, back to shaving the beard, as long as it doesn't, that wouldn't be a problem. Right? In other words, the reason is because it doesn't cut like a razor. It cuts like a scissors. If it cuts like a scissors, it does not get to the root, then it wouldn't be a problem. And even that wouldn't be a problem. Some say you shouldn't use any of them because some of them, may get closer to that. Someone asks, is there a possibility that prohibition related to other pagan cultures shave their heads to mourn? Yeah, that's the next verse, right? That's the next verse. Don't make cuts in your flesh for a person who died. Not etch tattoo, right? The tattoo is talking about idolatry. That's Torah prohibition. Is idolatry. Any other tattoo is a rabbinic prohibition, and it's only prohibition in one shots. Doesn't mean that every second you have it, you transgress. Once you did it, you did it. Obligation to take it off, you don't have to. It's a good thing to do, but you don't have to. Even a person who converts, you go to the mikveh, it's not going to nullify going to the mikveh because it's part of your skin. Right? It wouldn't be a problem. Now, not making cuts in your flesh of a person, not necessarily for idolatry. Might be for idolatry, but I think there is that, you don't want to mourn so much that when you mourn, when you mourn, that you end up, like pulling out hair, shaving your head, or any of these things. I don't know if it's totally has to do with pagan culture. It could be, right? That could be. Shemitah Israel, that's right. 10 statements plus what is mandated, the total is 613. Yeah, I mean, it's a ludicrous thing. You only have to keep the 10 commandments. Again, all these statements come back to one thing. Where does it say that? Where in the Torah or the prophets or the writings say, I don't have to keep any of it, except for the 10 commandments, because they're more moral than any other. These are the most moral things that are out there than any other of the 613 commandments. Where does it say that? Right? Give me that fact checker. Where does it say that? Doesn't say that. Doesn't say that anywhere. He uses a razor you can't use, right? Because a razor cuts down, or something similar to a razor, right? What about nair, right? Burns. Can you use something like that? Destroys it. That's the whole question, right? If it destroys it, you're going to say, but it's not the same thing as a razor, but destroys it. Yeah, so maybe not allowed to use that either. I've got to explain why some Jewish men grow their beards very long, because they don't want to shave it. They don't want to trim it. They're afraid, since we're not really sure exactly the place where to do it, they're afraid that if they do it, then they might transgress the Torah prohibition. So they're going to be extra, extra careful. They're just not going to shave it. They're not even going to trim it, right? I asked my Rabbi this question once. I asked him. I said, "Do you ever, did you ever trim it?" And he's like, "Not in your life." Because what's the fear? You don't know where. It's not clear, right? It's not totally clear where. It's not totally clear where, right? So it's not totally clear where. You don't do it. So you let it just grow, right? Some people I know they put like an elastic around it, or I know someone's got got it like tied up or whatever. Other people do different things. Some have it longer, some have it shorter. But why wouldn't a person want to do that? Want to trim it in any way, shape, or form? Look like Grizzly Adams in some ways. Why would they want to do that? Very simple. They don't want to come onto a Torah prohibition. That's the reason. Someone says, you have descendants. Does biblical Maidon have biological connection with the current day people of Persia? Right? I don't think so. Right? Yefet was Greece. That had nothing to do with Persia. That had nothing to do with Persia, or Persia being modern day Iran. Yeah, let me see other questions here. 1 second. All right. Yeah, any other questions? So again, I just want to make clear, like, you see statements like this, you got to break it down. What does the person mean? Or what, is the statement true? Or is it not true? But, say we can't keep all the commandments. It's impossible. Again, some are going to apply more to women, right? So you're going to say, oh, but, some men can't do it, right? Doesn't apply to them. I mean, some things do. A woman gets a period, a man doesn't. I mean, I'm not talking about transgender, but a man doesn't, right? A man can't uncover his wife's nakedness during that time, right? Can't be with her at that time. Okay, so technically, he doesn't get his period. Okay, right? So that doesn't necessarily apply to him. Okay, but applies to her. So what are you going to say? Oh, see, Torah doesn't apply to everyone. So I should change my body so I could, potentially, take all these hormones and get a period like a woman so I can fulfill that. I have any obligation whatsoever. I mean, for goodness sakes, if the Torah says a man can't wear women's clothes and vice versa, that's not the only ramification of just, being a cross-dresser. A man can't change to a woman and vice versa. I mean, you don't change anyway. No matter what body parts you exchange. If you're a man, you're a man. Doesn't matter what you cut off or not cut off or whatever. Keep this clean. You stay a man. You stay who you were biologically. Are there 10 or 7 points of the beard? And that's why I thought, yeah. In other words, you got 5 points. You got here, you got the top here, right? On the jawbone, bottom of the jawbone, and in between. They got at least five. At least five. Some are stringent, they don't trim down here either. But many rabbinic authorities say you can trim it. You can cut it down. It's not a prohibition. Others say, maybe we have a doubt. If we have a doubt, you don't touch any of it. Yeah, any other one? There we go. Any other questions here? What should we visualize during prayer? So I was just learning this the other day, came up, and that is one thing you should focus on, or the main thing is think that you're standing in the Beis Hamikdash. Think you're standing in the Holy of Holies, right? In the temple itself. That's what you should envision. That's what you should envision. You're standing in front of God in God's holiest place. Right? In the temple itself. I just saw this brought down the other day. That's what a person should think. Right? But at the very least, at least understand, first of all, what you're doing, and understand at a base level what you're saying. That can uplift the person. Talking about God's greatness and what he does in the world, and all that. Especially when things are tough, you see it more because even here with everything, with everything going on, you see unbelievable things, unbelievable miracles. No question. I was just telling someone earlier that with all the vast missiles been sent over the last 2 years, thousands of missiles. You've had direct hits, 100%. There have been direct hits. People have been killed. The vast majority of missiles either got knocked down or fell in areas where it didn't do any damage. And even if it did some damage, okay, right? But they can kill people. Yeah. So someone wanted to claim that, well, the question whose defense system is better, right? Israel's or Russia's? Could Russia take out, Iran's missiles, ballistic missiles, or whatever better than Israel? But again, you take God out of the picture, it's like, you're saying, okay, the Patriots work better, this thing works better. But even with all that, I mean, just the sheer damage that it could do, that really it should do, according to nature, and pretty miraculous. Yeah, that was pretty miraculous. I don't think anyone wants to go through it. No one wants to be part of it, right? Tremendously scary thing, no question. But in the bigger scheme of things, you see God's in charge. You can't deny that. Certainly can't deny that. It's a wake up call. This is something. I've heard a number of people say, what is going to be in the end of days? What is going to be the mitzvah that we have to work on? And that is emunah, right? That's our faith and belief in God, that God runs the world. Yeah, it's kind of hard to live in a small place and, being attacked all the time and, and different things from within and from without. You're eyeing heavily on the U.S., for better or for worse. It's hard. There's no question. So it's either, there's an ultimate plan. Like Rabbi said, there's an ultimate plan. A lot of times we don't understand what the plan is. Very hard, it's very hard to understand. You can say it's a direct result. We attacked Iran, they came back. Okay, but what's the bigger plan? What's the bigger plan? It's not just tit for tat. It's not just you're going to attack them, they're going to attack you. Like, where's it end? Where's it end? Right? They want to make sure they don't get nuclear weapons. Okay. But where does it end? It's not going to stop. Where does it end? Right? There has to be an end goal somewhere. There has to be going somewhere. Right? It's not just going to be like, the stalemate and whatever. Something's going to give. Could it be the end of days? Right? Final war, Gog and Magog? Could be. Could lead to that. It could stop and, things go somewhat back to normal, whatever. And, anything can happen. It's anyone's guess. But we're not given the bigger picture here. But what we see is that, the Chofetz Chaim said, before the Messiah comes, generation is going to be coming very quick. Things are going to move very quick. And things are moving very quick. How does it end up? How long does it take? Again, you know, it could take longer, it take shorter, but it's, you know, yeah, I think the writing's on the wall. Do I think the Messiah could be here within the next 50 years? I think it'd be less than that. The way things are going, but who knows? We got 200 years, 200 so on years until the Messiah has to go. But if things are moving that fast, it's hard to imagine. Very, very hard to imagine because we already have many, many signs that we're living in the Messianic era. So, you gotta see how it plays out. But again, what's the best protection? Best protection is prayer and learning. That's the best protection, right? That is definitely the best protection. So when a person has an opportunity to prayer, it's a golden opportunity. Not ask for all our needs and ask God, yeah, just protect us. No question. But it's like I was saying, like things going on here. It's like back in the day of COVID, right? Things shut down. Not a lot of people around. Kids aren't in school. It's the younger kids aren't in school, so it's like it's a very hard thing. It's a very hard thing. Business is closed. I mean, you know, a lot are open, but you know, I went into Jerusalem earlier, and usually it can take, I don't know, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, could take longer if there's traffic, whatever. I was in within like 35 minutes, right? Door to door. I mean, it's like no one on the road, you know. Not a question of like, okay, it's time, the siren coming, so you gotta be close to a shelter, this, that, there's nobody on the road. Right. I was telling someone it's like election day, like nobody's on the road. A lot of places aren't open, right? Cause strain on people, on the economy, on other things, okay. It's gonna be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see, where things go and how far it goes. All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday. 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Chaim Covenant, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos and Q&As, ethics of our fathers. Book of Leviticus, you want to send me an email, rabbichaimcoffin@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com, or some good day.